Between 1998 and 2000, Belize City faced a nightmare it had never seen before. 5 young girls, all school children, were taken from their neighborhoods in chillingly similar circumstances. 4 of their bodies were eventually discovered, showing signs of brutal mutilation. The 5th child was never found. The press began to call the unknown killer the Belize Ripper, drawing comparisons to some of the most infamous unsolved cases in history. What terrified the public was not just the loss of innocent lives, but the precision of the injuries, which suggested that the killer had medical knowledge. The case grew so large that it drew the attention of international investigators, including the FBI and Scotland Yard. But despite global resources and mounting fear, the case ended in silence. The murders suddenly stopped, and the killer was never found. Decades later, the Belize Ripper remains a name spoken in hushed tones, a dark chapter in a small nation's history. The story of the Belize Ripper begins with the children who became his victims. In 1998, 13-year-old Sherilee Nicholas went missing on her way home from school. Her family searched desperately, but when her body was found days later, the community was stunned by the violence of the crime. Not long after, 12-year-old Jackie Malik disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Her body, too, was found mutilated, raising fears that Belize was dealing with something it had never experienced before: a serial killer. The killings did not stop there. 8-year-old Erica Wills, a bright and innocent child, was abducted next. Her murder deepened the horror because her young age highlighted just how vulnerable the children of Belize had become. In 1999, 14-year-old Noemi Hernandez vanished and was later found dead, her body bearing the same surgical-like wounds as the others. Finally, there was Jay Blades, only 9 years old, who disappeared without a trace. Unlike the others, her body was never recovered, leaving her family in an endless cycle of hope and grief. What tied these cases together was not only the age of the girls, but the striking similarities in how they were taken and what was done to them. Each case seemed to carry the same disturbing signature. Belize, a country not accustomed to this kind of horror, found itself gripped by fear. Parents kept their children home from school, and the streets emptied at night. The names of
or even a butcher with access to sharp instruments.
the locations of the bodies also raised questions. Most were found in isolated or hidden areas of Belize City, places where ordinary passers-by might not go. The precision of the crimes and the careful disposal of the bodies led investigators to believe the killer was both intelligent and methodical. Yet for all the physical signs, very little usable forensic evidence was recovered. Belize in the late 1990s lacked the advanced DNA technology that might have solved the case today. Witnesses were scarce. In small communities, rumors spread quickly, but concrete leads were almost non-existent. Some residents whispered about seeing strange cars or unfamiliar men near the schools. Others believed the crimes were connected to ritualistic practices or organized crime. But without clear evidence, every lead seemed to fade into speculation. The ransom note-style clues of the John Bonet case were missing here. Instead, the Belize Ripper seemed to leave only fear behind. What troubled investigators most was how easily the killer seemed to move through the city, targeting young girls without being seen. It was as if he blended into everyday life, perhaps even someone the children trusted. The absence of solid forensic evidence made each crime scene more frustrating, leaving behind questions rather than answers. As the bodies began to appear, Belizean authorities quickly realized they were facing something far beyond ordinary crime. The local police force, with limited resources, struggled to handle the mounting fear and pressure from the public. Parents demanded answers, and the media spread the story nationwide. With the killings continuing, international agencies were called in. The FBI and Scotland Yard both joined the case, bringing expertise in profiling and forensic analysis. Investigators attempted to connect the cases through victimology, patterns of abduction, and the surgical nature of the mutilations. They built a profile suggesting the killer was likely male, intelligent, and possibly trained in medicine or anatomy. But despite their best efforts, no arrests were made. Each lead seemed to hit a dead end. Police interviewed countless suspects, doctors, medical students, even butchers, but none could be linked definitively to the crimes. Psychological profilers suggested the killer was someone who blended easily into the community, someone who could gain the trust of children. But without DNA evidence or eyewitnesses, the investigation stalled. Frustration grew. Files remained open, but without fresh evidence, even international experts could do little. For many in Belize, the lack of answers was worse than the crimes themselves. The sense that the killer might still be free haunted the community, deepening the wound left behind by the murders. With no clear suspect, theories began to spread like wildfire. Some believed the killer was a doctor or a nurse, pointing to the precision of the mutilations. Others suspected a butcher, given that Belize's markets were filled with men who knew how to use knives expertly. Still others whispered about darker explanations, linking the killings to ritualistic practices or cult activity. The sheer brutality of the crimes made people believe they were more than just random acts. One of the strongest suspicions was that the murderer might have been an outsider. Belize, a small country, rarely experienced serial killings. The idea that someone could strike repeatedly and escape justice led many to believe he had either fled the country or was never from there in the first place. Some suggested that after 2000, the killer might have continued elsewhere, carrying his crimes across borders. There were also whispers about high-level cover-ups. Families and journalists speculated that someone in power might have protected the killer, or that the case was intentionally buried to avoid political embarrassment. Although never proven, these suspicions grew because of how quickly the murders stopped and how little information authorities released. Conspiracy theories also emerged. Some believed the murders were connected to human trafficking, suggesting that the missing girl, Jay Blades, may have been taken alive. Others believed the killer may have died or been imprisoned for another crime, explaining the sudden silence after 2000. What made the case so unsettling was that none of these theories could be confirmed. Each possibility seemed plausible, yet none provided the closure families so desperately needed. Theories only added to the mystery, leaving Belize trapped between fear and speculation. Even though more than 2 decades have passed since the Belize Ripper killings, the memory still lingers in Belizean society. For families of the victims, the pain never faded. Parents who lost their daughters still live with unanswered questions, and the family of Jay Blades continues to live with the agony of never knowing what truly happened to their child. The impact on the community was profound. During the late 1990s, children were no longer allowed to walk alone to school. Parents became but also highlighted the weaknesses of a small nation's law enforcement. For years, the case was studied in criminology classes as an example of how difficult it can be to solve serial murders in developing nations with limited forensic tools. Today, true crime enthusiasts, journalists, and researchers still revisit the case, often referring to it as one of Central America's darkest unsolved mysteries. Documentaries and articles continue to ask the same haunting question: who was the Belize Ripper? But perhaps the most chilling part of the legacy is the silence. The murders stopped in 2000 as suddenly as they began, leaving many to wonder, did the killer simply vanish? Or is he still out there, living unnoticed, carrying the secret of his crimes? The Belize Ripper remains a phantom in history, a reminder that sometimes, even with global resources and modern profiling, evil can remain hidden in plain sight.